Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
Kristen, you do not look a day over 29, and yet we are 100.
Happy birthday to us. We are 100 Power Up episodes in, and we're super stoked. And as Nat pointed out, as we were prepping for this episode, 100 episodes and one award. Yay us.
One award, 101. Also, we're 100 weeks old, and really fitting today because the way we're going to get to 200 episodes is through growth, right? Like, we very much rely on organic growth, which means you, dear listener, are so instrumental in helping us grow. And today we are going to talk about influence, which means you can apply all of the tips you learned today to influencing your friends, colleagues, team, everyone to also listen to the Power Up podcast.
I love how you tied that in. We are talking about influence, and the why we are chatting about influence is because we have a male allies section of our membership network, and the interviewee of the month last week was a guy called Stu Van Rij, and he is an expert negotiation coach. He's a leadership coach, and he specializes in influence. And we had a great chat with him, and then Nat and I have since been thinking about it a lot. This week's newsletter is on influence, and we just wanted to share some of those thoughts with you.
Well, and also we are influencing him to come back for our women members to give a mini masterclass, because influencing is such a huge topic, but it's also so nuanced. And I feel like after listening to him, I have some blind spots, but I think they're really common blind spots in our approach to influencing and why we get it so spectacularly wrong a lot.
Did you know, and I hate to put a gender lens over everything, but it's kind of our business model, but did you know, Nat, that women...
We hate to do it, but it is our business model.
And we actually do love it. But women, and it matters, this stat alone, women are 30% less likely than men to be considered influential in their organizations.
Well, it's interesting because I think we've spoken a little bit before about executive presence. We've got a great mini masterclass on that too. And, you know, those classic things like higher voices and the way we present ourselves and all of these things are just gender specific stuff that leads to all sorts of biases, which I imagine also leads to that biased likelihood.
But it is so important because I know that LinkedIn ranked it as one of the top 5 leadership skills in that we need to develop is influence. And then finally, those that excel at influence earn on average 40% more promotions than their peers. So while we're not kind of deep diving into negotiation, we've done that in podcast number 1, we are talking about just generally the skill and why it matters. And actually we use it every day.
Well, yes, because I think like we like to swap the word money for freedom, I think we should swap the word negotiation for influence, because everything is about influencing. And I think even if you look across the board at these, I've been digging into some of this as well, those really famous public health campaigns, you know, anti-smoking, 5+ a day, road safety, stop, drop and roll was a big thing here in New Zealand, the fire safety stuff, which has some hilarious stuff on Instagram about people saying, I thought I'd need to do that a lot more in my adult life as a kid. But all of these campaigns are based on influence because, and this is a great example, that a lot of us embrace or utilize influencing tactics that aren't scalable and aren't practical day to day. So like for the newsletter, the top 2 that I've discovered is either emotional bribery. So I need it the most. Please do this for me. I deserve this. Or incentives like financial rewards, reciprocal relationships. And when you're trying to influence not face-to-face, aka in leadership, you can't resort to those 2 tactics. So when you're doing these big public health campaigns...
Wait. Are you saying I can't stamp my feet and yell and say, but I want it?
Yeah, you can. And how does that work for you when you're saying that to your children?
It actually doesn't work, does it?
Well, that's face-to-face as well. But like if you're saying that to an entire organization, what are you going to do? Give everyone a pay rise or like really guilt them into doing something? So trying to figure out these scalable tactics is actually something that most of us don't have in our tool belt. We resort to these 2 really basic tactics that aren't that helpful. But the thing that was a real light bulb moment for me is that they don't build any of this really critical, what's it called, a social capital. It doesn't help you build social capital. You're doing a transactional influence, not one that's based on people wanting to do something for you. So I found that really interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it's not manipulation. It's not this, because I mean, that is a form of influence, absolutely. But it is actually it is actually getting in other people's heads, figuring out what their values are and keeping your reputation intact and ultimately getting to a win-win. How is it that you can encourage, inspire, excite people, get shared common understandings or goals to get them to do the thing that ultimately kind of needs to be done?
What was your biggest fail in influencing so far?
My entire 20s. My entire 20s was a fail because I couldn't figure out why I couldn't get a win on the board at my workplace. So I worked in corporations through my 20s. I was always in growth roles. And so I'd have plenty of ideas how to drive growth. And I would think that was so wonderful that I could say, how about this? And what about this? And we could try this for growth. And have we tried this? And I couldn't get anything across the line. And I just remember at one point in my career, I was probably in my 30s at this point and going, man, it would be so great to get a win. And I probably hadn't done the work to figure out what was my managers at the time, who happened to be very busy executives. What was it that mattered to them? How could I speak in their language? How could I storytell? How could I get on the levers that matter to them and explain it? Because, and Stu has actually said this question, what is it that they aren't seeing? And I was such a fail at describing the thing that they needed to see.
I think you've identified a third really common tactic, which is data and evidence, like this concept of I'm going to create the perfect business case and everyone's going to be wowed and they're going to get exactly what I mean. And I find that so interesting because I think that's really common as well. And a lot of us have experienced going in and being like, but it makes so much sense. And what we haven't done is recognize that what our motivations are might be quite different. Like we say this all the time to power suitors as well when they're trying to influence what they want. Your goal might be to get a promotion. Your manager's goal might be to reduce the amount of time they have to spend on something. So if you can tie what you're doing to what they need, you're going to be way more successful than giving them a really good evidence-based list of all the things you've achieved because you're not solving their problem immediately. So you're going to be not getting that same result. My biggest fail in a personal influence was I adopted a cat when I was in my early 20s. And then I wanted to move overseas for a bit. So I wanted my parents to take on this cat. And of course, my mum flat out refused. And I did the stamping and yelling and crying and everything. And like, why won't you just do this? The cat's going to die. And it didn't work.
What happened to the cat?
Well, I think it went back to the shelter. Like it was like a foster cat. So we had to take it back to the shelter, which was kind of the agreement anyway. It was just that I was like, a savior of the world kind of 20-year-old and was like, why don't we all just band together and save the cat?
It's kind of interesting because the one thing that where your example ties in with mine is there's always this background information that we don't know or political information that we're not aware of. So sometimes the no has nothing to do with you or your work or even the evidence and all the great stuff you present and the levers. Sometimes it's like, actually, we're about to kill your product line, so no. Or, there might be political stuff in there. Like your mom is like, this will really be hard on our marriage with your father. Like there's just stuff.
And the cat peed everywhere. I mean, it wasn't a great argument, but no. I think there's some like everyday things that when we think about influencing, I think we do think about those big negotiations, but I think it would be worth listing just a couple of those everyday influencing scenarios, just so that we can tie this back to really practical, like this is what we're talking about. So have you got a couple more examples?
Yeah, well, mine was kind of this how do I get buy-in for my idea? That was something that was quite common early in my career. I think navigating difficult conversations. I am in a household of now 3 adults and 1 teen, about to be an adult. So we're navigating how to live with a social contract. And I know that would be every relationship. It's every colleague, workplace relationship. So that's another one. I think also getting stakeholder support is another one. If you have a sponsor for an initiative or project at work, you are in a good place because you have someone at a high level that is invested in whatever the thing you're doing. What about anything else from you?
Yeah, I was thinking some of those, like that stakeholder support thing. We are operating in pretty divisive times. So I think even outside of work, we often find ourselves in situations where we're in the middle of a conversation with someone at a very different end of the political spectrum. We at PowerSuit operate in this concept of closing the gender leadership gap. And if you've seen some of the news articles recently, there's a lot of pushback now against DE&I initiatives and this idea that lifting other people up somehow means dropping standards, which absolutely it doesn't. And what I find all of us end up in these situations is it's quite high tension and no one changed their mind. In fact, we tend to embed our beliefs even further. So I think now more than ever, the ability to sway opinions and hearts and minds is really important.
I come from a family of debaters, and I'm married a non-debater, and the one thing I've noticed is the debate never gets the other person over to the other side. So it's probably not the right tool to use, which leads us to, we actually think we've got 3 tools to consider when you're working on influence that could be more appropriate than debate. And this was from Stu, the golf course analogy. And this is that we have a set of clubs that we carry around with us as leaders, as managers, as parents, as people in relationships. And sometimes we may wield the one club in all interactions when we're trying to influence others to do something or to get on board or to join us. And the fact is that there are different clubs for different situations, and we need to figure out which club to use. And so an example is that a kind of a dictate CEO might use, for example, a driver all the time, because that is direct communication, do this thing. And so that CEO, let's say that direct CEO, goes into every situation with using the driver, and that won't work. So the point is that we actually have to use different clubs for different situations as we're navigating through our lives.
Yeah, I mean, I've only just recently found out that about the golf clubs, and Kristen does laugh at me about my set of golf clubs, and apparently they're not up to International Golf Pro standard, but
they're not up to like basic B standard. I'm sorry. They're like $2 clubs. They're about 9 pounds to lift one club, but no, go us. We are golfing pros, so.
I like the wedge club. I don't know which one that is, but I've seen an example of this recently, again, going back to the DE&I stuff, where a woman at her office was accused by a guy of just getting the job because she was a woman. And she said, okay, let's get some data out. And so she said, I'm going to get out all my school records, all my achievements, all my qualifications, and please get out all of yours. And let's go step by step for what kind of background did you grow up in? Oh, you came from a wealthy background? Okay, I didn't. Second, what school did you go to? Oh, an extremely private, rich school. Okay, I went to a very bare bones public school. And then she's like, what qualifications you got? And every measure she bet him. And by the end of it, he was like, you didn't get the job because you're a woman. You got the job because you are the most qualified. And I just thought that was such a great example of, in some situations, really getting out that evidence works. Like, you actually can use it. But that was a very specific situation. And another time, that would have gone terribly wrong. So I quite like that as a use the right golf club for the situation.
Yeah, I love the wedge getting us out of sticky situations, tailoring the club to the particular person on the other side and the situation, recognizing that people have different values. And that's why we have to use different clubs. Like, some people so appreciate direct communication. Tell me what you need. Tell me what you want to do. I'm going to use a driver with that person. You know, they're very senior, they're limited time, they or they just want direction, versus other people might value more of the data and need more of the data, need evidence.
Yeah.
So I like that.
I also think the other thing we haven't mentioned so far, and I'll use it under the golf club putter, is listening. And I think this was such a powerful idea in influencing. And I'm sure we all think we do it more than we do. But if you are in a conversation with someone who has starkly different views than you, how much time do you spend practicing active listening? And by that, we mean listening to understand rather than listening to answer. And I think when we're in an influencing situation, we're so desperate to convey our opinion or our idea that we sometimes forget the part of just the power of listening and just asking questions and really understanding the other person's perception. And we have done this, covered this topic a few times, and how it covers actually all range of situations, but active listening is such an underutilized tool. And we know that every time we get power suitors to do an activity where they have to practice active listening, firstly, they realize how hard it is because they're so used to jumping in, and they don't know the questions off the top of their heads to draw out information because we don't practice it enough. But secondly, how powerful it is and how much more you learn. And it's, you can practice active listening for 2 minutes or 5 minutes and get leaps ahead of just going in all guns blazing, trying to convey what you want to convey.
Yeah. And I have to say that I have had to use active listening a lot over the last couple of months because I've had visiting family who are my family. Again, I said I come from a family of debaters. They like to be heard. They like their opinions known. And I didn't marry into that. So I've had a very peaceful home until these visitors have come in. But what I've noticed is they actually just need to share. And they're sharing because of fear or concern, or they, genuinely feel powerless. And so I have really practiced, even over the weekend, just listening to the barrage of stress that come from North America. There's a lot going on there right now. And in my head, I'm like, nothing you say is going to change anything. Let's change the topic. But then I'm like, oh, they actually just need to get it out. Like they're really freaked right now and they just need to get it out. So yeah, all to say that I have genuinely been practicing my active listening.
Well, and then that also gives you, I think even in that situation, that helps you find common ground to influence from. So like if someone's ranting and raving about a big issue and they've gone down rabbit holes and led into misinformation, whatever, being able to interpret that and say, what I'm hearing is that you really care about the future of your country and you really care about making sure everyone gets what they deserve or whatever it is, like the values. And you've completely disarmed the defense mechanism, but also taking the conversation around the specifics of what into, we agree on this. How else could we go about achieving it? And I think is I think that tactic, again, used across lots of situations, is really powerful in influencing, finding that common ground.
Yeah, and I love that as a putter. Well done, Nat. I love that.
Putt, putt, putt. That's me as a golfer.
Let's move to another tool that we've got. And this one is a little bit harder to explain, but I really appreciated it. And the way I've thought about it is in a personal example. So this is about the second tool we can use when we're looking to influence is the power of process. We've got a system of how we approach things. And just like athletes would have a system with how they train, we should have a system when we approach things and are seeking to influence. The biggest thing I took away, and I'm really keen to hear what you took away, Nat, was anticipating the pushback, because then you've got your system. How you approach things is in anticipation of that pushback. And I'll give you one quick example, and then I want to hear how you digested this, the power of process. So for me, I knew with a very stubborn child that her getting dressed every morning would be problematic. And I needed to influence her to get dressed in order to get out the door and everyone get on with their lives, us go to work, so on and so forth. And so for me, the power of our process and getting a process in place so that her values and reputation were intact, as were mine, was my process was I'd come into the room and I'd say, you can wear this outfit today or this outfit today. Which one do you want to wear? And she would choose one and we'd be done with it. So she had the power, she got to choose, and I used it all the time in parenting. And so that was my process because I could anticipate what was going to come if she didn't feel like she had power or choice or was being difficult. And that's how I took that power of process. What did you take away from that?
See, I would almost put that down as a golf club, if that's a tactic to give different options to someone and so that they could choose one or the other.
I think that was my system. That was my system to dealing with that context and that negotiation. That was my system, was choice.
I would say in the context of system for me, the way I read it was like, a golf course is 18 holes, but let's say you're playing one hole. One hole is a negotiation, and you're using different clubs through that negotiation. So each step along the way, you apply a different tool. So the first tool or the first club might be really listening to understand and gathering information. And then when you do your second hit, that's when you're starting to feed back and find that common ground. And then the third tactic, which is actually what I would say you did in your process, you realized that by listening to her and recognizing what she needed, the tool you needed to apply next was choice. Yeah. That's why I feel like it's more of a club, because then the other club you might have used is like, what is it? The direct communication one, the driver, and just being like, we're getting out the door now. But that wouldn't have worked for her, whereas it might have worked for another person. So the way, that's the way I saw the system, and recognizing that by halfway point, which might be their first response, you are actually only halfway. So what's the next step after that? And they might respond in all sorts of different ways, but going in prepared, not just for your first tactic, which might be, I'm just going to go listen. It's like, great. After that, you're going to have a whole system around that, and multiple steps along the way that have to adapt to what their response is, because this is not about you, and this is not about you enforcing what you want. It is about creating an environment where you can come to a win-win understanding.
Okay, good. I like it. Do you have a example with kind of systems that you've got as you're navigating situations?
Yeah, I feel like I keep going back to this idea of influencing other people on, I don't know, really different ends of different political spectrums or different ideas, or because I feel like that is, especially with the work we do when we're trying to talk about the gender leadership gap, or even the idea that women may actually have a disadvantage, is not a generically believed argument. Like, there are a lot of people we speak to who will make a joke about, oh, haha, it's because poor men these days. So like, we are having to do an awful lot of influence to get people to feel really comfortable with the concept of power suit. So I feel like if I use that golf analogy, I mean, that's exactly what I do. I really try and listen. And there's often, you start to realize there's common trigger words. Like, people will start to say, oh, but it's all about the men these days. Men have got the back on the back foot. Yes, but I don't want to lower my standards so that women get the job, or all of those things that you start to pull out and go, okay, I can place where you're coming from in this, and you are afraid that someone's going to take your job, and you are afraid that we are now creating a system that you thought was fair that you think is now no longer going to be fair. So that, to me, is that listening, and then sort of digging into some of those emotions, or like really validating someone's feelings or experience around that, of like, yeah, that must have been really hard when this happened to you. And do you think, and then starting to go into, what do you think maybe they felt about it, or, you know, whatever else that is, and being really comfortable. That's why I love the golf club analogy, is to go really comfortable going, oh, I'm going to put that one away and pull this one out. And at any stage, you might pull out any one of those golf clubs, depending on, yeah. So I feel like that's how I
kind of go hand in hand. Yeah. And there was one that you loved, the third and final tool.
Asking yourself, or asking them, firstly, asking them what their experience is a great one. But before that, going into any influence situation, asking yourself, what is it like to be the other person? What is their experience of this? And if you force yourself out of that selfish mindset of trying to hammer home your message and into curiosity around, what is it like to be them? You will, by default, come at it in a totally different way.
Influence is the ability to understand what is going on in that other person's head, the prep work, so that we can prep the process, we can understand the club that we need to use. So in a way, we've got these all backwards. That maybe is the first thing that we should have started with, then the prep work, the process, and then the club. But I digress. I think I love that it's in order to get into that other person's head, the most powerful question we can ask is, what is it like to be them? And that will take us on a journey of going, what do I know about them? What do I need to know about them? How do I get to understand what matters to them?
Well, we've talked about this with conflict before, that you go into conflict feeling so hard done by, and they've done this and they've done that. Whereas if you actually stop and ask, what is their experience of this? You have a very different answer. So I just love that question in general. Do you have a quote for today?
I do have a quote, and it is...
What a shock.
It's from Barbie, played by Margot Robbie. And she says, I thought leadership would feel like having all the answers, but really it's about bringing out the best in others. And I think that exemplifies influence.
I love that. That's so true, eh? We all thought that when we were kids. You're going to grow up and be the boss. And then you get to tell everyone what to do. Then you get there and you're like, oh no, everyone's telling me what to do.
And then how do I bring the best out? That literally is what we wake up and have to think about with however many people that we've got around us. So, so good. Well, great. Well, thank you everyone for 100 episodes this week.
100.
Yeah, this week, choose your club consciously. Do the prep work. What is your process? How are you approaching things? And then ask the question, what is it like to be them? Give us a 5-star review. Check out all the things Power Suit. What else, Nat?
No, you've done the 5-star review. Have a great week. Try and influence something this week. Think about a situation where you'd normally come out frustrated or don't feel like you get, in quotation marks, your own way, and just try something slightly different. Use one of those little tactics, and then we'd love to hear how it goes. Even if you're listening to this 2 years in the future, please let us know. We love to hear from Power Suiters.
Yay, everyone. Catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.